Welcome back. Alright guys, I know Hansel and Gretel left us on a cliffhanger and I am ready to find out what happens to them. Oh my goodness. But in going into part 2, I want you to think about what does it mean to be a hero? Now we know a hero is brave and good, right? I want you to listen carefully to decide if any of the characters in Hansel and Gretel are heroic and if we come across anybody else that's evil. So, let's rejoin Hansel and Gretel, lost in the woods. It was now the third morning since they had left their father's house. They started along again, always looking for the way home, but instead only going deeper into the forest. Unless help came soon, they would surely starve. At about noon, they saw a pretty snow-white bird sitting on a branch and singing so beautifully that they stopped to listen. Then the bird spread its wings and flew before them, as though to say, "Follow me." And so the children followed the bird until they came to a little house. The bird flew up and perched on the roof, and then the children saw what the walls of the house were made of: gingerbread. And the roof was made of cake, and the windows were made of clear sugar candy. Ooh. "Let's eat!" cried Hansel. Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of candy, while Gretel chewed on a piece of wall. Suddenly, they heard a thin, screechy woman's voice call out from inside the house. "Nibble, nibble, like a mouse! Who is nibbling at my house?" The children answered, "It's only the air heaving a sigh! It's only the wind passing by!" The children were so hungry they went on eating, but then the door opened and a very old woman came out, leaning on a cane. Hansel and Gretel were so frightened that they dropped the food from their hands. But the old woman just nodded her head and said, "My dear little children, what has brought you here? Come inside and stay with me. I'll take good care of you." So she took them by the hand and led them into her little house. There they found a wonderful meal of hot pancakes with honey, nuts, apples, and cold milk. After that, the old woman showed them 2 little white beds, and Hansel and Gretel lay down and wondered if they were just dreaming. Now the old woman seemed kind, but in fact, she was a wicked witch. The story goes that she built her house just to trap little children, and once she had them, she would cook them and eat them. She could not see so well, but she had an excellent sense of smell. Earlier in the day, she had sniffed Hansel and Gretel coming near. The next morning, before the children were awake, the witch got up and looked at their rosy cheeks. What a fine meal I will have!" She cackled. She got Hansel out of bed and put him in a cage. Then she went back and woke up Gretel and shouted, "Get up, you lazy bones! Fetch water and cook something nice for your brother. Feed him well, and once he's nice and fat, I will eat him!" Gretel screamed and cried, but it was no use. She had to do what the wicked witch said. Day after day, she cooked pots full of rich food for Hansel, while she herself ate nothing but crumbs. Every morning, the wicked witch would creep to the cage and say, "Hansel, stick out your finger so I can tell if you're plump enough to cook." But clever Hansel held out a little bone that Gretel had given him, and the old woman, who could not see very well, couldn't tell that it wasn't Hansel's finger. She wondered why he wasn't getting any plumper. When 4 weeks passed and Hansel seemed as thin as ever, the witch grew impatient. "Hurry up and get a pot of water," she snarled. "Be he fat or thin, I'm going to cook him and eat him." And she filled the kettle with water and lit the fire. Tears ran down Gretel's cheeks. "First we will bake," said the old woman. "I've heated the oven and the dough is ready." Then she pushed Gretel toward the oven, where the flames were burning brightly. "Stick your head in," the witch said to Gretel, "and tell me if it's hot enough for us to bake the bread." But Gretel knew what the witch had in mind. She knew that the witch meant to shut her in the oven, bake her, and eat her. She knew that this was not a good idea. So Gretel said, "I don't know how to do it. Where do I look? Could you show me how?" "Silly child!" cried the old woman. "There's a big opening, don't you see? Why, I can fit in myself!" And she stuck her head in the oven. Then Gretel pushed the witch into the oven, and she shut the iron door and locked it tight. Gretel ran right to Hansel and let him out the cage. "All right, Gretel, let's see you." "Come, Hansel, we are free," she cried. "The old witch is gone." Hansel sprang out and hugged Gretel. The children danced for joy and then ran out of the house. Then, because they had nothing to fear, they went back into the witch's house. There they found chests full of pearls and precious jewels. "These are better than pebbles," laughed Hansel as he filled his pockets, while Gretel filled her apron. "Now, away we go," said Hansel. Then he said quietly, "If only we can find our way out of the forest." When they'd walked a few hours, they came to a wide lake. "There's no bridge and no stepping stones," said Hansel. "We can't get across." "There's no boat either," said Gretel. "But look," she said, "here comes a duck. I will ask her for help." So she called out, "Duck, duck, here we stand, Hansel and Gretel on the land. Stepping stones and a bridge we lacked. Carry us over on your nice soft back." Ride the duck? We gonna ride the duck? I don't know, let's find out. And lo and behold, the duck came over. Hansel got on her back and told Gretel to sit behind him. When they were on the other side of the lake, they walked on for a little while and soon found a path. The forest began to look more and more familiar. At last, in the distance, they saw their father's house. They began to run as fast as they could. They burst the door and cried out, "Father, we're home!" Then threw themselves into his arms. Ever since he had left the children in the forest, the man had been worried sick. As for the mean wife, he told the children she was gone now. He hugged his children and thought he would never let them go. As he squeezed Gretel to him, the pearls and jewels fell from Gretel's apron. When Hansel reached into his pockets and pulled out handful after handful of treasure, they were together again. Their troubles were over, and they lived in perfect happiness for a long, long time. The end. I'm so glad they are able to make it home. That was scary. Goodness gracious. All right, guys. So in the beginning of part 2, Hansel and Gretel are lost in the woods. How did they end up finding the old woman's house? Like, how did they find her house in the first place? Oh, they followed a bird there. Do you think maybe that witch sent the bird? I think she might have sent the bird too, but we can't prove that right now. All right, so we said that they found their way to the woman's house by following a bird. Good, they followed a bird. They followed a singing bird which perched or sat on the old woman's roof. Okay. Now, Hansel and Gretel have a new problem when they are told that the witch plans to eat them. Oh no. So, in response to that, Hansel holds out a bone to trick the witch into thinking he's too skinny to eat. Does this plan work? It does work for a while because if you remember, the witch has poor eyesight, so she can't tell the difference between a bone and his finger, and he doesn't seem to be getting any bigger. So, does this plan work? It does for a while. So, for a while. Eventually, like, what did they say, about 4 weeks? Took about 4 weeks, but she's like, you know what, fine, I'm just gonna eat your little skinny tail. We're not doing this no more. Alright, so what does Gretel do to trick the witch once she realizes the witch is going to cook her? What does Gretel do? She tricks the witch into the oven and locks the door. Good. So she tricks the witch. So Gretel's trick to the wicked witch once she realizes she's planning to cook her is to trick her into the oven. Alright, so she was able to get the witch to check the oven herself. She was able to get the witch to check the oven temperature herself, which let Gretel close and lock that door. Okay, so getting the witch into the oven. So she turned the witch's trick around on her because the witch was trying to trick Gretel. But Gretel, she's smart. She knew what was up. She's like, no. You go check the oven. I don't know how to do that. I can't do that. All right, last question. What did the children do once the wicked witch is gone? They take pearls and jewels, which they find in her home, and they make their way home. Through some interesting turn of events involving a duck, but the children do once the wicked witch is gone is that they take some of the jewels, as much as they can fit in their pockets, home. Because as you remember, part of the reason this problem happened in the first place was because their family had no money, which no money meant no food. And that's where they got into this place of desperation, which led the father and the stepmother to do the horrible thing they did of leaving the children in the first place. But yes, they take the jewels, they take the pearls, and they go back home to find their father, and they're reunited, and their family lives happily ever after. Happily ever after. Without a wicked witch or an evil stepmother in sight. Hansel, Gretel, and their father are able to live happily ever after. And just a point of note that we're supposed to take away from this one, this particular fairy tale also has a moral for us about talking to strangers. We don't do that. Be cautious in that. Alright guys, but that is all I have for you today. I'm glad we were able to finish the story of Hansel and Gretel, and I'll see you next time.